seeing one person being singled out, and then are we all guilty if we ignore somebody being teased, and not try to diffuse it and stop it?
And that is, like you said, we've all been in those types of situations, whether as a child or teenager or adult, and we have seen that. But what I also liked in here, this was an interesting part for me, where the captain sees what's taking place, and he understands, and he's friends with both sides.
Right.
It literally divided the crew, where the crew was on one side of the deck and the other crew was on the other side of the deck, those who were supporting Maddie and not, bullying her or teasing her for being different. But the captain is now in this situation where he doesn't want to take sides, and now he has to figure out how to make this work. And so I thought that was a perfect scenario, because, again, these traits are developed when we're young. We're either taught how to deal with these things as they come up. Are we going to, go for the people ganging up on someone, whether it be words or otherwise, or are we going to find a way to make it, like you said, diffuse the situation? And I know that that very scene, that actually happens more than people could imagine. Even where there is no intent to be a bully, sides are often, someone has to choose a side, but yet they can choose to be a peacemaker and bring everybody to an even level. And that I really appreciated that part, with the way you put the captain in that position. And he had to find a way of bringing everybody on an even playing field. And so he did by sharing. Go ahead.
That's exactly what the theme of the book is. And what I really want to point out is that there's no punishment. In other words, he doesn't punish Linus, and he doesn't punish them. He shames them for bullying, which I think is a pretty big punishment. He makes them realize how cruel it was, but he doesn't punish them. He makes them realize how wrong it is, and then the crew unites, and of course they figure out a way, and of course Matey saves the day because they've run out of liquid, and Matey finds a way to get them the liquid that they need on the boat, on the ship. But yeah, that's the whole idea, is that it doesn't have to be about punishment, and bullying is born out of ignorance. And once you remove the ignorance, people shouldn't bully. Once we remove the barriers and the things that, if we can all appreciate and realize that our differences are good and interesting, and maybe the ones we don't like, we don't have to acknowledge that part, or we don't have to emphasize what we don't like, but there's something good in everyone, that you can find something to like in everybody, and that should be enough. And I think bullying would disappear.
That's really true. There is always good in everyone, and he really helps them understand. And I like the drawn out process that he takes it through. He takes each of the crew members and says, tell me what you like about yourself. What's a strength, and then tell me something you don't, or what's a weakness. And so each of them have to think about themselves, that there's something good that they like, and then there's something that they don't like, or something they really need to work on. And it was just a perfect scenario in the story he drew the focus away from Maddie and this the way that they were all focused on her, the different aspects they didn't like, and they had to draw that focus to themselves. And then he just, I like the way you say this on the back of the book. You said, with sensible leadership. And he did that very thing. It was sensible. It got everybody to look back at themselves, good and strong, or good and our strengths and weaknesses, and then when they all could see themselves, they could look back at Maddie and they could relate to her. They were back on an even ground. And you just really nicely portray that in the story. It was very well done.
I also wanted to stress that the captain didn't ask, let's say, Hallie what she disliked about Linus, and didn't ask Polly what she could find wrong with Mongo. They had to search deep and be honest about what parts of their personality are not their best traits. And that in themselves, by making the character admit, which is exactly how I deal with my own children or my grandchildren or my husband, I mean, take your pick, or my employees or my colleagues, it takes the person out of this situation of being defensive by saying, okay, admit something that you know about yourself that you think other people might not like, is a lot easier to hear than hearing what other people say. I think that person has a bad temper, or because you automatically go on the defensive and the ears close down, and you can't even begin to heal yourself, and then stop the attack on other people. So I didn't even I never even realized what I was doing when I wrote it until after I read it, and I went, oh yeah, that's really good. It makes a lot of sense. And now I see why I've been successful, and that my kids are best friends, and they don't bully other people, and they always go to the defense of the person who is being bullied, and I'm really proud of them.
Well, again, it starts young. And I have to say as well, I'm very fortunate with my children as well, and they recognize things very quickly. And I also like how you mention that it can get quite complicated for children, especially when they are in a classroom situation. And a teasing or a taunting might start something very innocently. Not any children aren't usually thinking about, I'm going to bully and be mean to this. That's even not their thought pattern. But unfortunately, as we see in this story, it starts with one comment or one thing, and then it grows and feeds into other people. So a camaraderie can take place with those who are, wanting to bully or tease.
Right.
And for a child, how do you deal with that? So one of the things that I really like about the book, that what you did here, was you gave parents a lot to work with in this story. You not only to help them see themselves, but how you can move past it. Once all the crew members recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, Maddie gets to show some of her talents.
Right.
And that was really interesting, because you could have just ended the story there. Everybody walks away, everybody's on an even keel, and we all know that we have, good and bad things. that we like about one another, but you didn't leave it there. She goes and when they stop on the island and she gets to rattle the tree and down come the coconuts. And the very thing, it comes full circle. The very thing that started the suspicion when she drank all the juice, she gets to replenish it with a talent that she has. And, they all get to drink the coconut milk.
Right.
And I just thought that was a great way to bring it back full circle.
Well, it goes back to, when somebody teases somebody, they diminish their value. When a person is being bullied or teased, they're usually being teased on a weakness, and the whole idea is to diminish the person so they feel less of a person. And I wanted to say, you're teasing somebody that you may end up needing, their services or their value to the group, and don't diminish somebody because they may be able to do something that you can't. And we've seen that. The classic example is the school jock in every movie will tease the child that is, let's say, studious and kind of gawky, and then in the punchline is usually that's the person that ends up employing him or being the successful one in the world when they leave school, and the school bully, who's usually an athlete, ends up being the one who doesn't have the success. I'm not saying that's like a traditional, like a theme that you see running through movies from Back to the Future, and
that.
Revenge of the Nerds. It goes on and on and on. But why is it so prevalent? Because we've seen it. We've seen people gang up on, let's say, who's somebody they perceive to be weaker, and they really shouldn't judge that person. Even I think the Karate Kid, that's the thing. I don't really remember, but I sort of remember that all those movies are pretty much about not judging someone by the way they look, and don't mistreat them, because you never know, their true value to you.
That's really nice, the way that you just shared that. I wanna also mention, I like the way you take Maddie at the end, and not only does she provide the coconuts, she uses her talents to get the coconuts to come off of the tree, and then they all drink the milk. But then they get to go from there to using a little bit of imagination and going into an activity with the coconuts as well. And Carole, that's one of the things that I love about your book. Not just this book, but in all your books, like the cultural education series, where If You Were Me and Lived in Russia, for instance, every one of your books always leads parents to positive activities. And so I like the way that you end this one, where they're all working together and they're doing something positive and creative.
Well, Captain-No-Beard, the very first book, I didn't realize how many people didn't guess that the whole thing, because the name was An Imaginary Tale of a Pirate's Life, I didn't realize how many people didn't get it, that the whole thing was taking place on Alexander's bedroom, Alexander, of course, being Captain No-Beard, and that the whole adventure is taking place in his imagination with his cousin Hallie and his stuffed animals who become the crew members. And every time when I wrote another book, I had to finish it in the bedroom, on the bed, where which is the ship, and the carpet is the sea, and of course the walls are the sky, the ceiling is the sky. So I realized when I was writing, every time I write a story, I knew I had a conundrum with what was I going to do after Matey knocked down all the coconuts. What was I going to do? I had to have coconuts in the bedroom. So I used my own imagination, and I said, well, if I needed coconuts, how would I